Today on the Beginner Photography Podcast.
And if you don't change anything, you're not really growing as an artist, right? And so I think as I look back at those old images, it's like, oh man, the lighting is just horrible, or how it's composed is just so weird, or how I color graded the images are just like really odd. And so I think like in those first few years, it's me starting to understand photos and how it interacts with food, but also what my overall style wanted to be, right?
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, where each week we interview some of the world's most interesting photographers to learn what it really takes to capture beautiful images and compelling stories so that you can start to do the same. So, welcome back to this week's episode. Today, we are talking with food and lifestyle photographer and also fellow CloudSpot ambassador Nate Crawford. Now, I know Nate because he is also a CloudSpot ambassador, but also I heard him on the Craft and Cluster podcast, and after taking a look at his work, I completely fell in love. I gotta tell you, if I shot food professionally, it is exactly what I would want my images of food to look like. There's this sense of life and the sense of joy in all of his images. So today, of course, we're going to talk about that, how to give an inanimate object life through your photos. We're going to talk about how he used past non-photography experience to help him stand out as a photographer today, and how Nate pitches himself to brands and clients so that he can, keep working and do this thing that he loves so much, and how you can too. So before we get into that, I wanted to share that one thing, early on in the podcast, when I was trying to figure out, like, what is the show really going to be? I would look around at what was popular on other on YouTube channels or photography blogs. And it seemed overwhelmingly the information that was being pushed out was gear reviews and technical knowledge. And of course, those things are important to a degree. You need to know how to do things. As a working photographer, I know from experience that a great photo is more than the sum of its settings. And that online, it didn't seem to be like there were many spaces for photographers to talk about that. How they see the world, why they shoot, what it is that they shoot. So this week, I want to give a huge shout out to Murph2W1 for what they said in their 5-star iTunes review. Murph said, best photography podcast available. Raymond and his guests provide a launch pad for photographers just beginning in their journey. The conversations are not overly technical, and they provide insights for nearly every photography niche. Murph, thank you so much for taking the time to leave the podcast a review. I am so happy that not only are you enjoying the conversations of the podcast, but even though the conversations aren't super technical, you're still able to, take that info that you learn and apply it to the way that you shoot. That is so cool. Your review really lets me know that I'm on the right track. So again, Murph, thank you. Now, with that, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with Nate Crawford. Nate, I want to know, just easy first question here. Like, when did you know that photography was going to first play an important role in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know. So I got like into the industry young, but also old. I feel like so I was not 19, 18 when I first started the food photo sort of journey, and it wasn't really. I knew pretty early on that I really loved it because I really loved to bake and to cook and the food side, and being able to show that process of like taking flour, salt, eggs, and doing something amazing with that and turning it into something delicious really inspired me. And being able to shoot that process was just a whole other world to me of like, oh my God, that's possible. That's so cool. You're able to take a moment within this culinary journey and stop time. And that's so fun. And so I would say probably, oh man, like a few months into my learning to take images, I was like, ooh, I could do this forever as a career. And that was the goal. So
But I want to know, like, so obviously you were baking, you loved
mhm.
to bake. Like, what made you think, you know what, I should really take a photo of this? And then what about that grew into, I'm going to use more than just a cell phone, which a lot of people are okay with, but like I'm going to do this professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was like when I was learning to cook and bake, that I would make food and share it with friends and family, right? Of course, as everyone does. But I wanted a way of sharing the food that I made with friends and family who weren't close, right? Like family in other states, whatever. And I just grab my iPhone and just snapped a few pics of some like cookies I made, and that was the first image I ever took. And there was just something about like composing the image, seeing them on the table there, like the image itself is horrible, but it's an image that I truly love because it's really the first moment of like, ooh, I could do this. Like this is really interesting. There's something there, right? And so yeah, so just like seeing that moment just be like frozen in time, which is so unique to me. And so it's like, how is that possible? It's so cool. So yeah.
Looking back at that photo, now that you have the experience that you have today, what do you think it was about that iPhone photo that really stood out to you and, I don't know, made something click in your brain?
I don't know. I think it was just like there was something there. And I don't know, like if it was just the art of composing in the image and placing the cookies down, the styling like aspect, or what was it? But it was just something about the whole the whole like emotion behind it of like, oh, I'm gonna style this, I'm gonna take this image. And at the time, I didn't really know where it would take me into being here. And so it's a wild from point to point Z is a wild journey of times I didn't expect it to happen for sure. But there was just something there within that space of like, okay, I just like truly just a feeling of like, oh, I like this. And like this process is fun to me of taking items that I have made, shooting them, and then sharing them. That whole like three-step process really inspired me.
I love how you said the word emotion there because it's funny. I don't think that's something that people traditionally think of when they look at food photography. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe more when you think of like portraits.
Sure.
But when I look at your work, I feel the same way. But
Thank
before
you.
we get into the emotional side of things, I want to stick here with photography and learning photography.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you said you took that first photo with the iPhone. At some point, you had to upgrade to, a traditional DSLR or dedicated camera. What was that learning curve like?
Oh, sure. The learning curve was really interesting. So I went from the iPhone to a Canon PowerShot, which is just a point and shoot camera, very like bottom tier of entry, right? But like the camera is really nice because you're able to still like change your ISO, your f-stop, your shutter speed, but like you obviously can't change like any of the lenses, right? But it was a good camera to start out with, so I was able to learn, you know, what shooting in RAW meant, what changing the ISO did, what changing the shutter speed did, what when it comes to food images. And I shot with a power shot for probably a year or so. And then I knew I was at a point where it's like, okay, this canvas camera is really good for starting, but I need to do more. I need more options of lenses. I need more options of like just quality of image. And so I upgraded to the T5i, um, which I shot with for probably 2 or so years after that. Really enjoyed that um, camera. Like it's just such a powerhouse tool. The TI series is just like fantastic. Anytime I have folks asking me like, "Oh, which camera should I start out with?" And I'm learning all this stuff. I really lean on that series because it's such a fantastic level camera. Like it just has everything you need when when like you're learning the art form. So really loved that. I shot with that all through college, and then after college, I wanted to upgrade again because I was seeing that the camera, like the more I was shooting like higher brands or like lifestyle work, it was just not there yet. And so I upgraded to the 6D. Really enjoyed that, and Shaw with that for probably like the next 3 or so years after that for sure. And then this last year, I I upgraded to the R5.
Ooh, welcome to the team
So probably in
mirrorless.
what
I said, welcome to team mirrorless.
you know what, I didn't think I would fall this hard for it, but I love it. It's kind of insane the quality jump from uh going from like the 6D to the R5, just like the quality of image that you're able to get. It's amazing. Canon glass is just fantastic, and they have just like nailed this camera. Well, the R series as a whole, the R6, like all this is fantastic.
Hmm. So you had the power shot camera, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
had mentioned it helped you learn things like, what shooting in RAW meant, how to change your ISO.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody coming from an iPhone, like where do these terms come into your ecosystem, especially with something that's more of a just a point and shoot like a power shot? I guess what I'm asking here is that like many people today buy an R5 or an R6, top of the line camera and still
Mm-hmm.
only shoot in auto. And here you are, with essentially an entry level camera and you decided to dig real deep. So I want to know
Mm-hmm.
where did that drive come from? Like were you actively learning or trying to figure out how to take better photos?
Yeah, I think it stems from honestly a need of controlling from like the sense of I want control over all my art, where I wanted full understanding of what I was like the tool I was using in this, and how I was shooting it, right. And I think there's artists out there who use automatic who take amazing images, right. I But I think for what I was trying to do and how I wanted to learn photos, I knew that learning the confines of your ISO, your f-stop, your shutter speed, and how those three worlds interact and play and change each other was really imperative, because not every lighting location is going to be the same, right. And so and so really understanding the tool that you're using in my mind was really important.
So then what about so obviously like the learning the photography part is, as you said, really important to you, figuring out ISO, shutter speed, aperture, and how all these things work together. Was there anything within that learning curve that was particularly difficult for you to grasp or understand?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to sort of understand and learn is lighting how lighting and those settings play and interact, right. So understanding that if I put my light source here, if I stand here, what settings do I need in order to get a well balanced image, right. And I think there's awesome resources and classes and online things to learn all that. But honestly, it's really just trial and error, right? How I learned was just doing it, seeing the image and being like, oh, well, that's not a great image. Well, why is that? Well, let's change this. Let's add this. Let's do other things. I think so much of our art form is literally just doing it and seeing if it works, frankly, and like, okay, well, that did not work, so here's why, and let's find out and then change that, right. For sure.
Uh, that is such a great point there. I feel exactly the same. It's like for me, um, I definitely learn best by doing, right? Like when it comes to reading or even like watching podcast or watching YouTube videos, like it doesn't matter how good they are. If I
Mm-hmm.
don't actually do the thing, I don't think I'm going to retain any of that information. I don't think I'm going
Oh,
to
for sure.
learn any of that. Is that pretty similar to you?
I would say so, sure, because I think those channels and those resources are excellent to have, right.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're really great, but if you don't implement that info, is just like, well, what's the point? Why did you
Right.
do this, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the point? I love that. Um, I want to know now. So, how do you know about how long it's been since you took that first iPhone photo of those cookies?
Yeah, so I took that photo back in, I can tell you in June of 2014.
Okay. So
So
it's
now
been a number of years, right? It's been a
almost eight
number of
years, yeah.
years.
Hmm.
in this time, in this experience that you've gathered over these years, right? You've really dedicated a lot of resources in your time and who it is, who you are, to becoming a photographer and taking the best photos possible. And today, just by looking at your images, I mean, I'm not a food photographer, but just by looking at your images, I think world class right here, right?
Thank you.
Fantastic images. Over that time, I want you to think back to some of those earliest photos when you first got that power shot, right? Were there any particular elements that stood out to you as, like, now looking back, as like, oh, this is an amateur mistake. This is an amateur photo right here for something that you would do totally different today?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, 100%. I'm ironically enough, this last month when I was, you know, cleaning my laptop and hard drive, I came across a hard drive from like years back, with all these images from like my first few years shooting, and I was just like, ooh, yes, perfect. And you look back, and I think as artists, if we don't look back on images we took 10 years back, a year ago, then we're not really learning, we're not really growing if we don't look and see like, oh well, I would have changed this, I would have styled this like this. And if you don't change anything, you're not really growing as an artist, right? And so I think as I look back at those old images, it's like, oh man, the lighting is just horrible, or how it's composed is just so weird, or how I color graded the images are just like really odd, or there's like a number of mistakes, clear obvious mistakes of, like, I think me trying to learn photos, but also learn a style that I really enjoyed, and a style that made me really enjoy the process. And so I think, like, in those first few years, it's me starting to understand photos and how it interacts with food, but also what my overall style wanted to be, right? Because, like, I would see images on Instagram and be like, ooh, I want to do that. And then go and shoot something, and it would just not match up, right? Because those images, from what I'm seeing and how I'm shooting, are just, the quality isn't there yet. The understanding and education are not there yet, right?
Yeah, I think a few years ago I had on a photographer whose name is Mark Silber, and he said that that difference between seeing a photo that you like and that you want to capture and the photo that you actually capture is called the
Mm-hmm.
creative gap, right?
Oh yeah.
So as time goes on, all we can do is try to close that creative gap. So were you taking the same approach of, looking at your images after a shoot and thinking, this didn't work well, or this did work well, here's what I can change next time?
I think that sometimes I would shoot things and be like, oh, that was not it. And other times I feel like I would just be so, like, delusional, like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever done. Like, I made art today. And as I see back, it's like, oh, this is awful. like there's so many technical issues in these images. But I think that's sort of the beauty of our art form, is that you are always learning, and, like, you're always seeing a path. And I think for every photo I've ever done, I've learned new things on those shoots. And so as I grow and as I shoot even more, even now today, I'm still learning. I'm still learning new things and new styles, new processes. And I think that's what makes this industry so exciting, right?
Do you have one shoot that stands out to you, maybe as like, you thought in the moment, like, killed it, made art today, and then now that you look back, it's almost like, ugh, I wish I didn't shoot that?
Oh man.
I've got a few of those, which is why I always got to ask.
It's tough because I don't think I ever really, like, cringe or be like, I wish I didn't do that, because I sort of believe that, like, every photo is for a reason, and you take stuff in order to learn. I think there's shoots I've done and styles I've taken, which now my has so evolved that they don't really match anymore. And so it's like, this doesn't really work well with my approach to understanding of, lighting, composing an image, food styling, all that. um but I think there is, like, one shoot where I was starting like actually to do, like, food, like lifestyle images where there was like talent involved. And that shoot was a product, all this food, and so I spent the entire day prepping a whole meal. We took all this food out to this one park, and we had like a table there. We set everything up. We did all the photos. Talent showed up. They ate everything. They left. And I remember calling my parents at the time and being like, I know what I will want to do in life. I want to do exactly this. Because there's just something about creating that moment in time that isn't real but feels real, and the balance of like warmness of like community. Because like that style of shooting to me really encapsulates everything I love about food. It's the community aspect, it's the sharing aspect, it's the, you know, food is kind of a language where everyone can speak it, and like you don't need context in order to understand it, right? And those elements are all in those images, and so I feel like that was really the moment where I knew like, okay, I really want to take this to the pro tier and like a full-time tier. Like I could do this job forever.
Hey, Raymond here, and we're going to get back to the show in just a moment, but let me ask you, are you ready to start charging for your photography, but you just simply don't know where to start? Do you want a repeatable model that is easy to set up and grow with you? Do you want to make your first $100 with your camera? Well, let me show you how with my complete step-by-step roadmap to earn your first $100 with your camera that you can download absolutely free over at firstphotoclient.com. And honestly, even if you've been shooting for a while, the roadmap that is in this free download is still the exact method that I use today to book weddings. And yet, so few people are using it. That is a huge advantage for you. But again, only if you download your free copy right now over at firstphotoclient.com. Now, let's get back to today's interview. Can I ask what you went to college for?
So I went to school for hospitality management, which isn't anything close to photos. But why, you know, and so when I was in college, I worked in like hotels, events, and I love the industry. There's something about the industry that I just like really enjoy. There's issues within the industry that I had issues with, um, and why I left the industry. But you know, there's something very special within the hospitality industry that I love even now. I think you're able to make a moment out of anything, right? And make a guest day out of any moment, right? But I think there's something very powerful in that. And so I feel like that sort of energy is what I bring into my photos, where it's less about here's a plate of played a pasta, but here's a narrative we're trying to tell, and here's a feeling we're trying to invoke, and here's this hospitality energy that we're trying to convey throughout all of our images, right? And so I feel like that's sort of where my grounding in art comes from, is that sort of need of hospitality, right?
Wow, that got a lot deeper than I was expecting right
Oh, for
there.
sure, yeah.
I love that. And well, the question that I was going to ask after that was, a lot of people go to college for, something, and then at a later point they want to pursue photography, but kind of feel like they're like, well, I already spent all this time, I already invested all this money on this
Yeah.
thing, but now I want to go this way. But I love what you said there about like, no, you know what? I'm still taking a lot of the things that I learned, a lot of those lessons, and then
Mhm.
still applying it to this new thing here
Right.
being photography. And as I said earlier, like when I look at your images, and I emailed this to you, it's like I feel joyous, right? Like, and I can't think of a time. I guess if I were to have to explain food photography, I don't think joyous would be a word that I would use, and yet consistently all across the board on your images, and I want to know, like, was this intentional? Did you kind of plan that artistic side of things, or was this more organic in the way that you shoot? So could you expand a little bit more on that hospitality idea and how you use your settings to achieve that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think with food we have such an opportunity to sort of create create a moment, right? So how I've always approached photos with food is how I approach my own food as I cook, right? Because I come from like a long line of incredible home cooks where they would host these big parties and have family and friends over and holidays, and like food in my family is such an important capstone in our like family ethos, right? You know, so many holidays, events, trips we take, it's all about food. And so my sort of approach to that is from a hospitality standpoint of we're trying to make food in order to serve it, right? Serve guests, brands, what have you. And I think that sort of element of hospitality within our food seeps in through our photos and sort of highlights that feeling. Because I really feel like food without any sort of emotion behind food, it's just food, right? That like it's just a plate of something. There's nothing really there. And so I think in order to really amp up the party, you really have to really bring in that element of like joy, emotion that you feel seeing this food, because ultimately food is so much fun. Like I find so much joy in just like shooting food and chatting about food, eating food, like going to places to eat food and like see food. Like I just enjoy that process, and so anything about food I'm interested in, and I want to highlight that within my work. And so I think like that joy and that passion for just food community is found throughout all of our work. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's expand on that just a little bit, because you said food without emotion is just food. So
Mm-hmm.
it's figuring out how to bring in those elements that feel warm and inviting and, exciting, and the joyous there. Let's um I don't know. Can you give us what was the last thing? What was the last shoot that you did? Like what type of food was it?
So it was so really the brand was they're like a protein based like plant based meat product. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a perfect example because there's
Yes.
absolutely no emotion in plant-based protein. So what are those elements that you're referring to bring in that life and that joy and that hospitality feel into those images?
Yeah, so I think with those images, I think it was more of just like trying to find out like what feels homey. And I try and like, like if our audience here for these images is a home cook audience, trying to make the scenes feel homey and like lived in, right? And so my approach is always like, okay, what elements are we able to bring in here that make these images feel real, right? And so that's putting plates down that like have food already on them, if that's like scattering berries, whatever, parsley around the scene to help like bring in some texture, if that's adding any other like props elements to help tell that food story, you want to add those because it's really going to elevate that sort of raw narrative that you have there, because like there's plenty of food images out there that are just white table, white plate, the food, that's it. And that's fine, and that can be compelling and beautiful, but a lot of the time you look at those and you're like, okay, that's food, that's fun. But like the one, I think the folks who do food really well, they're able to sort of take a plate and make a feeling out of it. Like the art that I really love, food wise, I see their images just, and I feel something as I see them. Like, for you it's joy, but me it's like, oh, I feel inspired, I feel hungry, I feel something else than just like, here is a plate. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of dull and not very interesting. But I think you're able to bring in that element, that human element. I think it's really important.
I think you said something there that is going to get lost on a lot of people, and it was thinking about the audience and what feels like and how to achieve what you want
Mhm.
through that audience. So obviously for them it's that home cook. So what does it feel like to be at home making your own food? What does that look like? And I don't think that's something that many of us would even consider. You know, if
Mhm.
I were to go to a nice restaurant and just have this beautiful plate of food given to me, I would take a photo of that. I don't think that I would rearrange anything on the table. And for you to actually have to think, like, are we going to use blueberries? Are we going to use
Mhm.
tomatoes? You know, like whatever it is here.
Mhm.
I think that's really interesting. That's really important. So food styling is obviously a big part of your job, right? Or at least in the beginning it is. Can you tell me how that works for you today? Are you still doing the food styling, or is that a separate position that somebody has?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, so I would say like in food photos, food styling is like hand in hand. You really can't take a really good food image without a really good food style. And there's moments where like, it's only me, so I'm styling the scene and shooting the scene. If it's we're shooting for like a client, a brand, like I'll bring in a food stylist to help me just like style up our scenes, make sure everything looks right. So it really depends, but I would say probably nowadays I'm bringing in more food stylists than me actually shooting it, because like at the scale in which I am shooting, we are I really should only be shooting. I shouldn't be
Mhm.
doing other stuff. I should just be doing this. And so I bring in the expert to help me. Um, but I think like if your goal is to start shooting food, understanding the confines of food is really important. And understanding how food works, right? So how things saute, how things uh, cook up, how things bake in the oven. Understanding just like the simplicity of how food science works is also important. So I would say like food photos, styling, and food science, those kind of all play within this industry.
All right, I'm going to grab from your experience here then. And next time I go out to, a local restaurant, there's a restaurant here in Indy called Milk Tooth, and which is the
Oh my god, I
craziest
want
name
to
for a
go. I've
restaurant.
never been.
Oh my gosh.
So I wanted to go. So when we were in Indy, so side note here. So when my partner and I were in Indy last year, we wanted to go twice, and me just being like, I'll just show up. It'll be fine. Like it won't be bad. I think we showed up like Saturday morning, a 2 hour wait. Like
Yeah.
okay, that's perfect. I'll come back on Sunday. It'll be easier. Show up again, 2 hour wait.
Hmm.
And like there you can't like call in and say, hey, I will want to reserve. You just show up, and I didn't know this, and so I'm like, okay, well that won't work. So I haven't been, but I want to go so badly.
So then let me ask you next, when you do get to go, right? You're not bringing the fancy camera, you're just bringing your iPhone, you get the food. What are you doing with the camera? What are you doing with the stuff around you to ensure that that photo really has an impact?
Yeah, I think whenever you're shooting in a restaurant space, I think it's really important to find the best lighting. So if my intent is to shoot the food, uh, like asking to sit near a window where you're gonna get the most amount of like daylight, right? Because a lot of the time, like in these play, like in these spaces, the overhead lighting, the lighting, the ambient lighting, it's garbage. It's awful, and there's really no way to really bring out the food anymore with that style of lighting. There's folks I know who like bring in their own like handheld. It's like a square little box light that they'll like hold up behind the food near like the food, like so if they're in like a dark space, they're still able to like film and shoot without like
Wow.
really high ISO. It's wild. But I don't typically do that because I feel like when I'm out to eat dining, I'm just so enthralled by like the food process. I really don't take photos that often. And even if I do, they're mostly snapshots for like my stories on Instagram. Frankly, there's
Yeah.
rarely ever I'm shooting. I'm like, oh, like in feed posts would look amazing, but just more of like Instagram stories.
But I mean, do you take any um, additional not precautions? Do you take any additional measures just to make sure that even though it's just going on Instagram stories, you know, maybe you'll move the salt shaker a little closer or
Oh,
change
for
the
sure.
fork or something
For sure.
to get the most out of it?
Definitely it's spacing for sure. I feel like so much of like the tablescapes is all about spacing and how we space things and which props we're adding in. And so there there's been times where we're out to brunch and I'm like, wait everyone, I want a photo, and we all like style our little plates and style our scenes, and then we snap and then we eat. So moments like that for sure.
Beautiful. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only one who does stuff like
Oh yeah.
that. um, I want to transition now a little bit into the business side of things because, you know, I think Instagram brought rise to the everybody can take a photo of their lunch with their iPhone, you know, but as a business, you take it to that next level and you have to worry about things like getting paid and making money and things
Mm.
like this. So I also think that a lot of new photographers are very unaware to the whole B2B space for business to
Oh
business.
yeah.
Can you walk me through how the process of pitching yourself to another business works?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Ironically about me is that even though I do love photos, I love the shoot days, I love editing, I love all of it. The one aspect that I could do forever is like the selling process. Like finding brands, having calls, selling myself, our value to brands, then having them sign, like having a brand, having a pitch and having them sign, it's such a feeling. You're like, yes, euphoria. There's no other feeling like that. It almost feels like a win, right? And so I think selling yourself to brands is challenging. There's colleagues of mine who share over and over again of how challenging it is to like approach brands and sell yourself, self, and have all these calls. And I think my sort of approach to it is like, the worst they'll say is no. There is no harm in emailing a person, sending a DM on Instagram saying, "Hi, I'm so and so. Here's my work. Here's the value I'm able to bring you. How about we chat?" There's no harm in that, and I think aligning yourself with brands that match your style and your goals and your ethics are really important too. Um, and it can be challenging. I think what folks don't realize is that in order to get into this industry, it's so much of that process of like cold selling. It's so much of just trying to break into an industry that's challenging. There's many large brands who have their own guys who do their own photos, or they're third party ad agencies who have their own contacts. So like it really is just like throwing darts and hoping stuff sticks. For sure.
So what's the key? Is it just consistency?
I think it's a number of things. I think it's both having a really strong base of work, right? It's like having a strong portfolio of work saying, here's our work I've done for other brands. Here's what value I'm able to bring you. Um, it's literally just emailing them. There's so many folks who I feel like just stop before they even start, uh, because they just don't email the folks or don't like take like the time to connect with brands and like build those like relationships. It's just like there's not, there has to be that sort of drive in order to help that, right? um it is challenging for sure. I mean, like it can be a lot. You're trying to pitch brands. I know when I was starting out, like I would cold email brands with like paragraphs long of just stuff, just like of who I was, where I was at, why I love their brand, why I love photos, like just like paragraphs long. And why anyone even responded to me was wild to me, but they did. And it's starting that and learning that process and like learning that sort of like the sales hat on and being like, no, like my work is good enough in order to sell to you people. And if they say no, if they say, hey, we're not interested, we don't have enough funds, we don't have enough time, okay, whatever. And just being like, okay, awesome, we'll all be in touch. I like soon if you're interested. If not, then bye. You have to just move on from that.
Well, I think a lot of people maybe aren't as in love with the selling process as you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like oftentimes for myself, I question how much follow up I should have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you said that these are some big brands, right? Sometimes you reach out to people and you have to try to form a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of do you have a follow up process for, if they don't respond the first? Do you respond once? Do you follow up 10, 20 times? Like, what is that
Mm-hmm.
like?
Yeah, so I love this because follow up game uh, is what will make or break you in this industry. I I cannot tell you the number of brands that I have had signed who I followed up with three or four times, and after the fourth email, they're like, "Oh, sorry, we had issues, or we had this, or whatever." There's a reason, right? And so they're like, so I think there's no harm in following up. Um, I would say like my strategy is, and my sort of approach is, I will stop until they tell me to stop. Right. So I'm not emailing them every day. That's insane. But like I'll send out an email, wait a week. If there's no response, I'll follow low up there. And I kind of have like a three strike rule where I'm like, okay, well, if I followed up three times and no answer, that then like it's obvious that you're not interested for any reason. You're just not like interested. And so I'm like, okay, well, thank you for your time, but it's obvious you're not interested. Goodbye. And that's the email I end on. And it literally is just, so I have a spreadsheet of the brands who I'm trying to pitch to, or brands who have emailed me like asking me for work, and I have a little tally of like, okay, well, I followed up on this date here, first time, third time, whatever, and if I hit that third time, it's over. It's like, okay, goodbye. Because I just don't have the time to keep queuing up emails to you if you're not interested.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. This is just kind of a side question. When it comes to the follow up, are say those emails that you send back, right? Those follow up emails, are those more like canned responses, or are those pretty personalized for the brand?
It depends on what stage we're at. Like we're at a stage where they're signing the contract's already been sent out. Those emails are a little bit more like personalized and like, hey, like if you want to do a call and I can answer anything. It's more of those emails. If it's a brand who emailed me through our site and we haven't had any call and they're just interested solely in price, it's a stock email I send. Like, but there's times where I don't have time to send emails to everyone that's like, hello, how are you? It's literally just like, here you go, stock email, boom.
Yeah.
Because I just can't. And there's times some clients, I'm sorry, this may sound wrong, but there's some clients, some like potential brands who don't deserve that like respect because they don't respect you.
Hmm.
So why should I bend over backwards for a brand who emails me and uses my wrong name? They don't even say my name. They spell my company name wrong. Like, why should I respect that? I don't. And so I don't. And so the brands that do respect me, like, I'll respect them, right? And so I will follow up. I'll make sure that, like, because I think so many times, from so so in school in hospitality management, my goal was to work in like the advertising side of hospitality. And so after school, I worked for hotels and F&B groups, where I would do the advertising, the media side of those brands. So I have experience on both sides of those aisles, right? So I sort of approach it from, there's some contacts at brands who they're horrible at responding to emails. They just are, and they will be. And like if you don't follow up like one or two times, they won't answer you, frankly. Well, there's others who are very responsive, who are responding to emails instantly. And so it's a really wide range. And so being in the industry and understanding the types of managers and advertising folks you'll work with helps me understand like how I'm able to speak that language, understand like what value they need, right? So as I'm emailing them, as I'm sort of trying to pitch myself, I'm able to speak in final results of like if you book these images, if you get these short form content, uh, you're able to do X, Y, and Z with that. And that's through advertising, through organic, through whatever. And so being able to speak that language is important for sure, and it's helped me as well for sure.
I could see how that could be very helpful. Um, and I totally get that. Like if you get an email that's just where they get your name wrong, like if somebody gets my name wrong, like whenever I go to Starbucks, for some reason they always write Brandon on the cup, which probably tells me that I'm saying my name wrong. But regardless, like that person is no longer my friend. Like I don't like that person for
Oh,
the rest
sure.
of the day. So I get that. I totally get that. Before we wrap up here, because we're getting to the end of our time, I'm always interested in knowing because what's the phrase, hindsight is 2020, right? So knowing what you know now, I would love to know if you could take a time machine back 8 years, right? After you took that iPhone photo of the cookies and you thought, wait a minute, I could make a go at this. If you could go back to that moment and tell yourself anything, what would you tell yourself?
Hmm. Oh, that's tough, man. I'm torn because I feel like our journeys are meant for a reason, right? I think we 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 are on these paths because life, what have you, whatever. Um, I don't know if I would change anything per se. I think I would tell myself that like you're going to take really horrible photos, and that is okay. You're going to make stuff that isn't good. You're going to make horrible mistakes within your company, the brands you shoot for, the talent you work with, everything. Like you will make errors along the way, but just keep going. That like these mistakes are not the end of the world. What's stressing you out right now won't really matter in like a year. And to understand too that not every client will last forever. I think when I was first starting out, I thought that after I would get like a brand that they would be here forever, and that's just not how it works. Contacts change, folks are laid off, folks are fired, things change, and so with those changes, you have an opportunity to either keep them on or lose them. And there's moments where I've had brands, in 2020 with COVID, like I had a brand I shot a shot for every month, and when March hit, from March until like December, my contact there changed 7 times,
Wow.
and it was a whole other person I was chatting with. First gal was laid off, other gal was cut, like true, like boom, 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 boom. And by round seven, the gal who I was emailing with was like not interested in any of my work. Was like, oh no, we're good. We have folks that we're hiring in, and and so there's moments like that which are like really tough at times because you're like, man, like they were a good brand to shoot for, but not every client's forever, and every client has like their season with them. There's a whole other brand that I used to shoot for like 5 years, and they were like my top performing brand who would work like every year we would do all these shoots throughout the year, and the contact left and the no gal started, and she it just I did not mesh well with our styles and our how we worked, and she cut ties. And so it's just like, and so you have these moments of like, not like heartache, but like heartbreak. It's like, oh man, like 5 years is a long time to work with a brand, and to have that just cut, knowing that it's okay. You'll find other work, you'll find other brands, and there are seasons for every client. And to just enjoy the time you have with the client right now, because it could last 10 years, it could last a day. Uh, Things change for a variety of ways all the time, and that's okay. That is the industry, and that's how this game works.
That was quite a journey we just went on right there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I told you it'll be a journey.
Nate, I don't know how to end it any better than that. That was phenomenal. And I really think that's going to resonate with a lot of people as well, mainly because it's so easy to get discouraged. Just as a wedding photographer, I feel like every time a couple says, either you're too expensive or, we're going to go a different route, it's like, oh man. But
it's heartbreaking.
It is, but that idea of knowing like there's going to be more, like this isn't going to be the one, that really does help.
Sure, because I had like a brand this last year who we were shooting for the monthly, and this last year we had like a full plan of like, a year contract. It was in the works, it was in talks. I was like, yes, we love this, and for the year they had to cut ties because their funding got slashed, and I was like, and trying to explain that it feels like a breakup. It's like,
yeah,
it shouldn't feel like one, but it's like we had something here and now it's just gone. Like what happened, and so there is a grieving process, I feel like, where you're just like, man, like that sucks. Like, no, I wanted this to happen, but clients will come and go, but your talent and your work is still there. So
that's perfect. I said earlier, I don't know how to end it any better than that, but that last sentence right there, that was it. Nate, before I let you go, I know there's going to be listeners who are going to be interested in finding out more about who you are and see some of your work online. Where can they go to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at Captures by TK Co. The same for our site, and TikTok talk as well, where we're just us and all the young kids on the internet, and that's where we're at. We're posting a lot about like behind the scenes, about photo information, client work, all that jazz. So
you can hear it in Nate's voice that he truly loves exactly what it is that he does. He gets to shoot food, and I think that is so cool. One thing, I think my biggest takeaway from this interview was just simply that you have to lean on all of your experiences. I've heard from people who love photography but are terrified to invest either more time or more energy into it because, well, they went to school for something else, or they didn't grow up with artist parents, or, whatever. Nate is where he is today in part because of his experience doing things other than, photography stuff. Going to school for something else, growing up without a camera in his hand, so to say. He didn't let his past be an excuse. He used it as a strength, and you can too. I would love to hear your biggest takeaway from this podcast interview with Nate Crawford in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. You can join today absolutely free. It is the safest place on the internet for new photographers by simply searching Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast. With that, remember, the more you shoot today, the better you will be tomorrow. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.